Yeshar Kochachem. Wow, so beautiful. And Simon, what a treat to have you playing tonight with us. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It's great to see everyone. National Council for Jewish Women has for some time now designated the Shabbat of Parashat Mishpatim, that was 2 weeks ago, as Repro Shabbat. And when I was checking with Elise Keppler about her schedule and realizing that tonight is the eve of International Women's Day, I thought maybe we could hold that thought of Parashat Mishpatim for 2 more weeks as we welcome Elise tonight to speak with us. The reason the week of Parashat Mishpatim is chosen is because it's in the 21st chapter of the book of Exodus that Jewish tradition really has the underpinning of abortion access. The recognition that the status of an embryo, the status of a fetus, is not the same as the status of a born, full human being, and for all of the ways in which issues around our country and beyond our country threaten bodily autonomy, when we consider threats to abortion access and reproductive justice, frankly, they threaten religious pluralism as well. So tonight, I'm really pleased that Elise is here with us. When you know someone for 40 years, it's sort of like a fun little thing to think about, like, what stories of each other you could kind of share. The first thing that occurred to me is that because Elise and I got to learn together as children in Hebrew school, that maybe it's apropos that a week before Purim, we're welcoming someone whose Hebrew name is Esther to the Bima, and thinking about auspicious people being in auspicious positions at auspicious times is one of the themes of this season. When we were in middle school, and in the way that only one could, maybe in the 70s and 80s. It was the 80s, I want to clarify. But learning about the Holocaust in the ways that people were taught about that, as 3-year-olds in the 70s and 80s. When we were in middle school, I think that was the time where I started to see in my, I don't know if the word was friend, or we didn't have the word frenemy back then, but kind of a little rival, how intrigued Elise was by all of this, by genocide, by how could this happen, by how it is that we need to, as human beings, take care of one another across the world. And so to think back to being early teenagers and then advancing the clock, just a little more than 20 years or so, or about 20, and sitting in a bar together and watching my longtime friend get a text message saying that the president of Liberia would be brought to justice for his war crimes because of largely the work that she was... What? Okay, some of the war crimes at least. Okay, it's something. Because of the work that she was doing at Human Rights Watch in international justice. So Elise served in the associate director role of international justice at Human Rights Watch for 20 years, and recently, about a year ago, became the new executive director of the Global Justice Center. I invited her here tonight on the eve of International Women's Day to share about their work. And as we think about this horrendous moment in our country, particularly around gender violence, whether that's gender expression, whether that's limited access to reproductive health care, it's a pleasure to have someone here who is thinking about this on the international stage. In a lot of ways, I think we think about the local work we can do even with this horrendous administration in power, and maybe tonight we're going to get to kind of look in the other direction a little bit as well, though I don't want to assume your words. Elise, thank you for being here tonight, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you to CBS.
Shabbat Shalom. It's really such a joy to be here. I have been here, or attended CBST services for Kol Nidre for many years over at the Javits. I have never been at this position within the synagogue, but it's also such a joy to be here with Rabbi Klein. He said a little bit about me in junior high and how my interests then lead to my work now, but I can say the same for him as well, because since the time that I knew him in 4th grade, he wanted to be a rabbi. So it's really incredible to see us both in these positions and being able to reinforce and support the work of each other. I was thrilled to learn that there is such a thing as a Repro Shabbat and a focus on these issues, and it's certainly in this period, it could not be more important to bring attention to the challenges. But I promise this evening not to only speak about challenges, of which there are many, but also some reasons for hope and some things that Global Justice Center is doing and some things that all of you can do to paint a brighter future with respect to reproductive rights and justice in this country. I suspect many of you are learning about Global Justice Center or hearing of it for the first time this evening. So I want to just say a quick word about the organization. We call ourselves a small but mighty feminist human rights organization. We were established by the legendary reproductive rights advocate Janet Benshoff in 2005. And this was her 3rd chapter after working at the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project and starting Center for Reproductive Rights, with the aim to zero in for a human rights organization on achieving gender equality, and to do so by deploying international law toward that aim. The organization has 2 main pillars of work, because in fact that mandate could be many different things. Those 2 pillars are reproductive autonomy as an international human right and justice and accountability for sexual and gender-based crimes in conflict and crisis. Why do we have those those areas of focus? Because we believe advances in those 2 areas are absolutely central to achieving gender equality. So tonight, we are going to talk about reproductive rights and justice in this country. I will say that Global Justice Center had no history of working on reproductive rights and justice in the United States because for a very long time it was far from the situation that demanded our attention, even while Roe v. Wade, which had established constitutional protection for abortion access, was far from perfect. Those who worked in that arena know that there were always attempts to restrict access to abortion in this country and undercut Roe v. Wade, but we had a dramatic change and impact for this country when Roe v. Wade was overturned by Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, which eliminated federal protection for access to abortion in this country. What it meant was that it went back to the states and that different states could take different approaches to access to abortion. And it opened the floodgates to abortion bans, to increasing restrictions on contraception, to restrictions on reproductive health information, sexuality education, assisted reproductive technologies, and trans-affirming medical care. And this is before we get to Trump and the current administration. Just a recap of what this has meant in different states. We now have 12 states in this country where abortion is completely banned. We have 4 more states where abortion is nearly banned because the gestational limit is 6 weeks, when most people do not even know they are pregnant. We have 3 more states that limit access to 12 weeks. The situation is one where it's not only about restricting access, but different states have criminalized those who obtain abortions, miscarriage care, and in some cases even allow private citizens to bring claims against patients, providers, and those who help people obtain abortion care. The Trump administration, we expect, will add a lot of further harm and challenge to this situation. We looked back at what the first administration did and what we can expect as a result. And we also looked at the reality of the ideological through lines that undergird the Trump administration's approach. And that is to reinforce a heteronormative, patriarchal, and discriminatory system of power. Control over reproduction and enforcement of traditional gender roles will be part and parcel of that. So in terms of what does that mean and what are we looking at in this coming period, and in addition to what I've already described, we expect that there will be efforts to limit access to medication that allows self-managed abortions through what's known as the Comstock Act, which is an 1873 anti-obscenity law that bans the mailing of materials deemed obscene or lewd, as well as anything related to abortion. This antiquated law had not been enforced for decades, but it remains on the books and is now subject to revival. We also expect that FDA regulation there could be renewed efforts to reverse FDA approval for mifepristone, and that will limit a lot of access to abortion medication. The Biden administration was also an important force to see that restrictions on abortion in different states, there was not overreach. And a key part of that was legislation known as EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. Global Justice Center actually had submitted an amicus brief, friend of the court brief, in a case where the Biden administration sought to see that emergency medical care would preempt the restrictions on abortion access. The Trump administration this week dropped the pursuit of that case, and we can expect that the Trump administration will not look to see that protections are applied where they can be. We also have a situation with private health information. So now when there's a risk that protections for people who might be traveling across state lines to have abortion, that their medical information will not be released. We expect that there could be a rollback in that as well. We also see what's going on in terms of gender-affirming care and the executive order by the Trump administration and limitations on that care. We also, I think we've yet to see, frankly, the full scope because there is going to be a lot of permissiveness and experimentation to see far-reaching restrictions that will affect access to contraception, miscarriage care, fertility treatment, and preventable maternal mortality and morbidity, just to name a few aspects. Okay, I just painted a really bleak picture, but I promise to not leave you here by the end of this discussion, which is that there's also something pretty powerful that we saw in this election. While Trump was elected and his ability to project policies and practices at the same time, in every situation, or the majority of situations where the question of reproductive autonomy and abortion access was put to the people in ballot initiatives, 7 out of 10 times that access was preserved or expanded or cemented. So in fact, we have a population where there is large support for abortion access, and often we saw a split in the vote, that someone would be simultaneously voting for Trump, but also for abortion access. And in those 7 out of 10, the last 1 or 2, there were also some quite close situations. So even those were not lost in a big way, at least for 1 or 2 of them. This is a lot to work with and should give us hope for the future. And what we are seeing is that there are myriad efforts. There are short-term efforts, there are long-term efforts, there is storytelling, there is litigation, there is policy work. And all of that is going on, and I think it's really important that people not be so intimidated by the difficulties that are happening right now and unfolding that we crawl under the bed. No, we have to be out of the bed. We have to be on the streets. We have to be in the courtrooms. We have to be doing our work as community to advance these rights. Global Justice Center's space in all of this is somewhat of a unique one in terms of the focus on international law. Now, what's interesting is that for the lawyers in the room, you'll know that Roe v. Wade was based on right to privacy and was never seen, honestly, as the strongest, most robust argumentation, whereas international law provides a rich set of norms and standards that elucidate the ways in which abortion access should be protected and is protected. And although we don't hear a lot about international law in this country, many of these standards are ones that the US government has ratified treaties and is obligated to promote and respect. These include, and it was interesting to hear this when you said it, Jason, tonight, about, in Judaism, right to life. And when I talk about right to life, I mean right to life of the pregnant person. It's not the way it's talked about in the United States so much. And this relates to a core protection under the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. It also relates to freedom to avoid discrimination, both in terms of women and girls and the impacts that having to carry an unwanted pregnancy can have in someone's life, but also racial discrimination and conventions to eliminate racial discrimination because of the disproportionate impacts on people of color in the United States that abortion restrictions have. We also have right to privacy, right to liberty, right to health, and freedom to be free from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, which we see from the stories of people who are left out in parking lots because they are not able to access care until their life is truly on the line, sometimes with lifelong impacts to their health that follow them. So how are we deploying these international standards, these rich standards to work from? We have an amicus strategy. So I mentioned amicus briefs before. These are friend of the court briefs. They add to cases that are already going on with additional argumentation or facts. There are challenges going on right now across the country on abortion restrictions, and organizations are right at the center of those, bringing those, whether it's Center for Reproductive Rights, Planned Parenthood, a wide variety of organizations. Global Justice Center is working to identify across the country where there are cases where human rights, international human rights analysis can be brought into the debate and can elucidate the ways in which access to abortion is a fundamental right that should be protected. Now, we don't do this naively with the idea that suddenly US judges are going to be relying on international human rights law in their decisions, but we do this with an aim to bring to the discourse this understanding in different ways of these rights as fundamental, and to begin to put into the debate. So it's not just a brief that we submit. We do op-eds, we do panel, we do discussions just like this one. We bring into different kinds of conversations the ways in which these are protected rights. And our aim is not that 20 years from now people will be referring to Article 6 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but that the narrative about what this access will become more about something that is fundamental to our health, to our rights, to our things that are protected should be for all of us. So we are teeing up different briefs. We actually filed in Dobbs. We filed in this Idaho case, and we have cases now teed up or briefs teed up for cases in Tennessee, in Alabama, in Wisconsin, in Michigan. And we will continue to unfold that to supplement, complement, and support the work of activists and advocates and providers who are doing this work all over. We also go to Geneva Human Rights Council. We make clear the ways in which the U.S. is violating its obligations that it has signed up to help shine a spotlight, which may or may not have more or less traction with the Trump administration, but builds a record. And we do find that as much as governments may deny that they care about these issues, in fact, we do see that they are paying attention to the world looking on, and looking on as we can see that the US is now a global outlier when it comes to abortion access, and even places like Ireland, very conservative traditions, are not in as regressive, actually provide quite liberal abortion access at this point. I want to close, I know I've been talking for a while, and I want to close by talking about what can all of you do. I think people are struggling to figure out where can they, to get out of the bed and get into the work. So a couple things that I would encourage everybody to do is understand and learn more about what does it mean to have abortion access as a fundamental right. You can visit our website, globaljusticecenter.net, and we have materials about, and I can send some on to Jason so he has them if people want, Rabbi Klein, if people want to see them, that make the arguments, because part of this is about shifting and understanding, and we can all be part of that. So learn the arguments, learn the issues, share it. For those on social media, one way or another, follow us. When you see arguments that make sense to you, promote them. So learning is a big part of it. Of course, another piece is supporting organizations you care about, and I want to encourage everyone to think about what are organizations doing reproductive rights and justice work, whether it's from the international angle to the domestic, if it's more immediate, more long-term. But everyone can do their part to reinforce those efforts. And lastly, to think about how CBST can play a role in this movement. We were doing a little brainstorming before this evening's services, and I think you may hear some more about that in the future from some of the colleagues that were at that discussion. So thank you so much for making the time. It's great to be here, and thanks again.